I'm Steve Johnson, News Director of theDove TV. Watch more videos from the Dove Newsroom at thedove.us.
Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and we are delighted to have with us today Dr. Wendy Patrick. First of all, she's an ordained Christian minister and San Diego County Deputy District Attorney, and she writes a lot of articles, and she has a lot to say, and we are delighted to have her with us today to talk about the New York prison break and her new book called Red Flags. You may want to check that out. We'll talk to her about that. And a very accomplished lady, to say the least. And we got her. Yay! Dr. Patrick, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
Thanks for having me. Very well.
Thank you so much. Wow, a lot to talk to you about. We should have you on for about 3 days, but let's try to condense this down. What's your take on this New York prison break? Why'd you write about it?
Oh, well, first of all, I've been a prosecutor for 20 years and a defense attorney as well. And I got to tell you, this is not unique. We don't hear about it as much as it happens. But think about it. You've got a custodial environment where crafty manipulators have all the time in the world to strategize and approach to certain kinds of people. Now, it's not just women. I don't want to pick on the ladies. But it is true that we do hear an awful lot about women that end up becoming involved, whether it's on a friendship basis or more involved, whether it's an intimate basis, with male inmates. And what these guys do is really one of the things I write about in my book, is they find an area of vulnerability, because we all have them. We like to pretend that we don't, but we do. Whether it's intelligence or looks or sex appeal or success, whatever our vulnerability is, these guys take the time to figure it out and then behave in ways that appeal to meet that sense of vulnerability, to give us the emotional fulfillment that we're looking for. Now, how do we know that went on here? Well, she said it did. She said that these guys made her feel special. Being made to feel special is sometimes something that's lacking in other parts of, let's use a female example, because that's what we're talking about here, maybe was lacking in other parts of her life. So she was susceptible to that, and on that basis was very receptive to building a relationship, which really predisposed her to wanting to help these guys, which she ended up doing.
Well, you know what's interesting about that those emotions can override the obvious. You're in a hugely controlled environment, very strategic environment. Actually, the breakout is a whole nother thing. But why would they allow their emotions to go past this wall that seems to be over the top of them?
Because we are not driven by logic. We are driven by emotion. All of us are the same. Logically, of course, she knows it's unlawful and she's charged as a criminal. It's criminal behavior. And that's one of the reasons that I talk about, we share her susceptibility to vulnerability, right? We're all vulnerable. We don't share the criminal behavior, but some people have allowed that to override their sense of right and wrong. Clearly, she knew what she was doing was wrong, but she did it anyway. We see this kind of phenomena happening in all walks of life. She's not alone in what she did in that environment. But let me add something that environment sort of, an enhanced vulnerability in this case. Think about it. When you're seeing the same guys day in, day out, you begin to build relationships. You're not supposed to because of the power imbalance. But there are lots of correctional officers that will say, look, these guys are crafty manipulators, and they know that even though there's this power structure that everybody has to respect, and we don't use the word friendship when you're talking about relationships between correctional staff and the inmates, there really is no other way to characterize it. When you see somebody every day, you begin to be friends. And that is basically how it happened in this case, is these inmates exploited that relationship to get what they wanted.
So at some point, it's somewhat of a fantasy because she kind of snaps out of it because she didn't show up to pick them up.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. How do we know that these guys ever wanted to have her pick them up? I mean, if they are smart enough to have strategized this whole prison break, what's to say that they don't have a plan B? After all, remember, they didn't even tell her where they were apparently going to be driving to. So this may have been a whole part of their plan, that they were never going to show up at that meeting up point because she might have gotten cold feet and did exactly what she did, start cooperating with authorities. So they may be miles, if not countries away by now, because we have no idea whether they were ever going to make it. And nonetheless, having said all of that, she is still a great source of information for law enforcement because she knew them as well as she did on the inside.
Yeah, I think she's going to be a great source, especially down the road as the prison looks back on our own security. All right, let's skip over to your book, Red Flags. You really write a fascinating thing here, that there are some red flags in churches that Christian ministries and Christians should be aware of.
Yes.
Like I said, I wish I had you for a couple of days, but let's go through a couple of those. Give us a couple.
Okay, I'll give you a couple. And by the way, I do this talk at churches all the time because I share your concern for wanting to read parishioners, read staff members. The flags are focus, lifestyle, association, and goals. And let me start with focus, because churches are very, very concerned with the multitudes of people that apply to work there. How do you choose the good from the bad? I'll give you a focus example as it relates to people that are fixated on children. Focus reveals fixation. And here's one of the red flags I usually give people that are hiring to take care of the kids. How long can you sit on the floor and play video games with your 5-year-old? Can you make it 20 minutes? How about half an hour? If so, parents, congratulations. A child predator can sit there and play with the child all day long because their focus is not on entertaining the child. The focus is the child. That's a very scary red flag that doesn't get the amount of attention that it should. Lifestyle is the second one. How does somebody, and I call this red flags after 5, how does somebody spend their time when they're off the clock? Because let's face it, that's the time block that is most telling about their interests, their hobbies. If they go to the bar, we would read them differently than if they go to the video arcade, where somebody that's skeptical like me might say that might be a pedophile. So what do they do when they're off the clock is very revealing. Associations, who do they hang out with in their free time? Is there peer group children when they're 51 years old? Or is their peer group same aged adults that all go to the same church, which makes them a lot safer of a bet? And of course, goals. Do they have short-term goals, long-term goals? Are they long-range planners? What are their ambitions? And where do you fit into that sort of a dance card of activities in their day? So that's just a sampling. And I could talk for 3 days. You're right. We need a long block of time. But that's kind of a sampling of the types of things you look at to separate the dangerous from the desirable.
You know, what's interesting about this, Dr. Patrick, is that the churches really are so vulnerable and are easy targets for those who want to live a double lifestyle. And yet we have, those of us who are in leadership in churches and ministries, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt because that's the Christian thing to do.
Yes, and forgiveness is the Christian thing to do as well. But I got to tell you, history predicts the future. What is somebody going to do in the future? What have they done in the past? Sure, people are saved all the time. They turn over a new leaf. Great. But we've got to judge the tree by the fruit it produces. And you can't judge the fruit or even see the fruit unless you know where to look, what to look for, and what to do with the information you perceive. I can't tell you, I've been a prosecutor for a lot of years. I can't tell you how many defendants come to their plea and tell me, I have found the Lord Jesus Christ, I've become a Christian. But what do I say to them? Congratulations, you're going to heaven. But first you're going to prison.
Wow. Do you think the future of this is going to get even more heightened as the church now seems to be targeted? In other words, we're almost expecting plants, depending on how some of these Supreme Court decisions are going to go, to see whether or not churches are going to bow down to some of these agendas. I mean, we could actually see plants in our church. How can we spot them?
Well, plants in terms of somebody that's there checking it out and really not there because they want to worship God, you would probably look at the same types of things. You would look at whether the rest of their lives match the persona that they're giving to you. And I know the joke that some people might be thinking right about now, gosh, if I could behave the rest of the week as good as I behave on Sunday morning, I get all of that. But there is no denying consistency creates credibility. Look at their lifestyle. Look at their focus when they're not in your church congregation on Sunday. Look at their associations. Who do they hang out with? Remember, we are judged by the people that we spend time with, guilty by association. But it can also be validation by association. If we surround ourselves with the same kind of people that we profess to worship and be in communion with on Sundays, there's a much higher likelihood that it's all legitimate. And of course, goals. Why are you going to church? Why are you associating within the Christian community? You may be able to hide for some period of time behind some kind of a facade, but if you look at those 4 flag areas, you can't hide forever because you're going to be outed for who you really are, which is how we all recognize church plants versus people that are coming to church because they are genuinely engaged in the church experience.
The book is entitled Red Flags, and you can go to wendypatrickphd.com. That's her website, wendypatrickphd.com. There's a picture of the book up on the screen there. Check it out online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and get a copy. And I want to have you back because there's a lot here. But let me ask you this. Obviously, you wrote the book because you see and have a concern. What is it?
Well, it's been a culmination of 20 years of victims asking me the same question. How did I miss all of these red flags? And I got to tell you, the revelations about why people fall for crafty manipulators come from the witness stand, not from the therapist couch. For the past 20 years, I've been the one asking the questions, and this book is about the answers. I wanted to really put into practice and good use everything that I've learned over the past 20 years. And although my PhD is in theology, it was based on really this whole idea of the psychology of attraction. I learned about it when I got my Master of Divinity degree. I learned about it getting a PhD in theology, and it has a lot to do with ministry, as to how do we really reach out and make a difference, what really sways people to be influenced one way or another, and how do we tell the benevolent from the malevolent. So this book is a culmination of 20 years of practical experience backed up by solid empirical research.
Whoa, you are an inspiration. Thank you for your time. We'll get you back soon. Again, wendypatrickphd.com, and the book is entitled Red Flags. Thank you, Dr. Patrick. We'll connect again real soon, okay?
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll be right back.